Hey, Patrick.
Hey, good morning. So George is not joining in today, but let's give it a minute or two, see if anybody else is going to join, and then we can start.
Okay.
All right, well, let's get into it. So, I'm sharing my screen. Can you see it?
Yep.
Right, so welcome to March 16th, 2023 Aries VCX community call. It's just two of us from UPSA today, so I'm not sure the antitrust policy is notice is needed. There's no competition involved here between two of us, but nevertheless, just in case, I'll still follow the standard procedure. So this is the antitrust policy notice for Hyperledger, and I'll just keep it displayed for a short moment. All right, so let's get into the agenda. I kind of flipped it around today, and instead of leaving the kind of discussion points at the end, I just put it in the beginning. So the kind of like interesting announcements and interesting discussions can happen in the beginning when people join, and then perhaps the overview of the working process and that kind of things, and the specific task and implementation details might be more mundane to some attendees. So I just left it basically for the second half. So to start, to kick this off, I would like to just announce first the mentorship program which we applied for. It's a program by Hyperledger. It's been going on for a couple of years, and we have submitted application for Aries VCX. There's two projects for Aries VCX. One being the basically uni FFI mobile wrapper. So that would be the LibVCX substitute. We are looking for a mentee who would be willing and would like to work on this task. All details are included here. I know that there's at least one person already interested in working with us on these tasks. The other task we have submitted for review is implementation of Aries mediator built on top of Aries VCX. That will be useful for entire community, and at the same time it'll be just interesting application of Aries VCX, maybe drive us to improve some APIs, seeing how it's being consumed from actual application. So these are two tasks of us. Now it's pending for review by Hyperledger committee, technical committee, I believe, which will decide which of these projects will get accepted for the program. So yeah, we'll see. That should take, if I remember right, until the end of this month or so. And next up, I have yesterday created a bunch of good first issue type of tasks on GitHub. So they are tagged with this good first issue tag, and basically they are very simple. But the idea is that the people who would like to contribute, it can be very helpful for these people to have something really laid out for them and really well described. Maybe, even though it's simple, we should make it really easy for newcomers to follow the instructions. I think what I've done here could be still perhaps expanded even further, but it's very simple issues. So this could help, and I would like to just encourage anyone to create more of these issues. Just I think it's important to make sure they are really specific and concrete, so that the new people don't have to understand the entire context of the project and all of the refactoring going on, or they don't have to be necessarily experts on Rust. So I think this can be useful initiative for just getting more people, even complete outsiders, into the project. We did something similar in October when it was Oktoberfest, and we had the one person or one or two people who actually sent a PR, but at that time we didn't really have those good first issues, I believe, written out like that specific, and maybe it wasn't easy to begin with. So yeah, I just thought that we should come up with some sort of guidelines for these good first issues, and the kind of guideline I was trying to follow here is first like just make a brief description what should be done, then like describe the task in few points, and then also include what will that person implementing this kind of learn, so they know what to expect or what kind of areas of Rust they'll explore. So in this particular task, they'll have to deal with the trades a bit and mocking and testing. And there's other tasks which maybe dominates different like areas or like requires different type of Rust skill. Well, if there's no further comments, then I'll move on the next point. So that's a more mundane and standard part of the meeting. So the overview of the work recently done. I saw that I'll start from the bottom of the list this time around. I saw in the morning that George has pushed new updates to his PR about making VDR tools basically optional, and make it you enable using feature flag to essentially opt out of VDR tools and instead use the smaller library components as a dependency. So this is still in draft. I'm not sure what's missing here, but it's passing. So we'll need an update from George as to if this is ready or if there's something yet to be adjusted. The next item, which has been mostly done, but is yet pending for review, is work done by me. This relates to changes of proof verifier API. In particular, the methods around like figuring out the status of the presentation, revocation, and like Aries state. So we previously had 3 methods, and one of them was a bit convoluted and didn't really add any informational value. So that function I'm referring to was called presentation status, or maybe get presentation status in some setting. This was removed essentially. Like, I guess it depends how you look on it. Like the implementation was like deleted. The way I proceeded is I deleted this function. Then I took the function get revocation status and essentially I renamed it into get presentation status. So you could argue that the presentation status function was not deleted, but it was just largely changed. And it now reflects what originally was called get revocation status. So it's a bit mixed up, but the end result, basically I described at the bottom. The end result of this PR is that there's 2 functions. There's a get state, which simply returns the sort of Aries state, the state of the state machine itself, of the protocol. And the second function, get verification status, which can have three values. The presentation was either valid, or it was invalid, or it's unavailable because we perhaps didn't receive it, or the presentation was not verified. So these are 3 results possible, and yeah, originally there was one more function which essentially combined these 2 together, and it didn't really make sense. So this was simplified, but it is technically like a breaking change. I mean, the implementation of what was called presentation status function has changed. As well as what has changed are some of the internals of this verifier state machine. For example, we previously stored a field called revocation status in the final state, the finished state, which was now renamed to verification status. And also the values which this field held was either revoked, non-revoked, or it was actually option, so it could be none. Now, instead of that, this new renamed field has different set of values, which is either valid, invalid, or unavailable. However, it's made in a fashion that this PR is still backwards compatible, so you are still able to deserialize the old state machines with these changes. However, when you perform serialization, the serialization will be now like new format. And so this reading the old serialization format, basically, which was before this PR, that will be eventually dropped in release 0.54. So what is expected that you should do if you are using verifier proof state machines is that with release 0.53, you should essentially re-serialize all of your state machines again, so they would be saved in the new format. And therefore, in a 0.54, when with this backward backward compatibility deserialization support drop, you will not run into issues. So you need to reserialize your proof, verifier proof state machines. It's quite a bit, but I try to describe it really well in this description as to all of the details which have been changed. Does it make sense?
It does make sense, but I'm wondering a bit. Sorry, I was speaking too loudly. Okay. Yeah, so it does make sense, but I was wondering if, like, this implied some refactoring and adjusting stuff and all that. What about just directly, because the plan is to ultimately get this implemented as in that type state pattern. So why not just go directly towards that?
Yeah, well, basically this is kind of preparation for it. I just wanted to make it, firstly, I ran into this because of some internal implementation outside of Aries VCX. Is like a run into realize that the API doesn't quite make sense with the 3 functions we had before. And I thought that the way it was convoluted, it will actually make it difficult for, you know, whoever is going to be migrating this. It's going to actually make it difficult to like understand how should it be migrated. Why is it 3 functions and didn't really make sense. So this, and obviously this is like a smaller effort than, you know, if I would do the entire rework into state pattern. Okay. So I just kind of, iteratively wanted to update this to make sure that the stuff we have now makes sense. So it would make sense. It would be straightforward to actually apply the, you know, state pattern refactoring. So then it could be like, there could be less functional changes, and it would be more of a like structural pattern remake, I guess.
All right.
Okay, and actually, there's I put a discussion point on this, like following up on these changes, as I have.
I've actually seen this in the beginning, and it's one of the reasons why I asked, because stuff like getting the state would no longer be an operation that's done necessarily. It might be on something that aggregates all the states of the state machine, but for the actual type state pattern, you no longer have a runtime check of the state, because you know the state you're in based on the type that you have.
Right.
So that's pretty much why I asked. Like, it looks like this poses some questions that would need to be resolved. And then even if we resolve those, then later on, they're not really going to matter anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, the changes which has been done, like they don't really. This is a bit like, you know, this is something a bit else. It's just something you know, like additional questions that are raised while doing this, and also based on this discussion we had before in George's PR. And yeah, like, you're right. The get state function I mentioned here will not exist anymore. But I guess I was still, there's like, I guess it kind of applies, maybe a bit less. Like, well, I guess it's more of a VCX question in the end, I guess. So maybe it's not worth it to discuss this part. However, this part is still relevant. So, you know, right now, you know, we have states, for example, in the credential issuer, we have state, credential sent state, and then we have finished state, and we don't have failed state. Yeah, right. And so the way it is, so first of all, the credential sent state and the finished state, the only thing which differs between them is that, or the way you transition from credential sent state to finished state, is that you send the credential, then you are in a sent state, and then you receive acknowledgement message from the counterparty, then you go to finished state. And a question which begs to ask, like, is it even worth it to have like this as two separate states? Would it make sense to just have one, I don't know, credential sent state or finished state and have a flag, you know, acknowledged in it? Or does it make sense to actually separate it as two things? And I'm not sure, it's kind of an open question. If you look at the RFs, you know, and how they designed it in the RFC, like, well, this doesn't really talk about states though. It talks more about the actions.
But I guess it really just boils down to that. So once you send the credential, can you do any sort of action?
Once you send credential, you can
You just
revoke
wait
the
on the
credential.
acknowledgement. I mean, yeah, but I kind of see them as two separate states because it's about, like, that's what the state machine is ultimately about, just tracking state of different things. Even if something, like, even if nothing internal has to happen and it depends on an external event, it basically keeps track of where you're at in the flow, right? So, because otherwise you can practically just emulate the state machine by just having, I don't know, a big structure with a lot of fields and just have some flags on them and just do a lot of ifs or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the overall idea is basically the separation of concerns. So I kind of see them as different states, even if they're not necessarily different, like structurally.
Yeah, right. I guess that makes sense. But then I guess the second question I'm curious about is your opinion is then the like finished state and failed state. And I'm not sure if our approach is actually entirely consistent across the board. Let me check that. Prover, states, finished.
And
I guess we are consistent.
while you're
So
looking for that, I just have one more thing to say. Sorry.
yes.
Maybe from a like conceptual point of view, I guess the differences that can occur between a credential sent state and a credential finished state is that, for instance, when you sent the credential and you're waiting for it to be acknowledged, you kind of like you're still having that pending action bound to happen. So maybe, I don't know, let's say you hold the state machine in a database. So knowing that something will, like, you're expecting something to happen on this particular piece of data, then I don't know, you might store it differently compared to a state machine that's in a finished state and nothing else is going to happen later on. Like a finished, I don't know, credential or proof request or issuing a credential can basically, I don't know, just be moved to someplace else for auditing purposes or logging purposes or stuff like that. Like it can technically be archived, you know. You're not gonna be using it anymore,
Right.
I guess. So I guess that would be like just a difference in behavior, which might make it more clear why a different state, you know, is more representative.
Yeah, that makes
What's
sense.
actually happening.
I think that makes sense. I mean, to distinguish them, since it's still a kind of protocol level
Right.
event which is expected, I guess it deserves at least like a separate state.
Right.
But then the second question is
How to treat
the like
failed
success
state.
versus failed state, and like basically both success and failed state, they are kind of the final state. Right, because like you cannot, once you finished successfully or you failed because you received a problem report or you just failed for some
Right.
reason, you're obviously not going to move anywhere else. And that's kind of like in RFCs, they typically have one final state to, I guess, make the diagram simple. I mean, it makes sense, like it's the end state. But then, if we kind of separate the for example, the send state and finish state this way, like successful state, wouldn't it also make sense to separate out the finish state into like, finished success and maybe finished failure? Because the way we do it right now is and it's on all of the state machines, I guess, except for connection one, is we have status, and then status is a term of different variants.
Yeah, my opinion on this is that we can basically design the state machine, with that generic type, and when it has the failed state passed in as the generic, we can implement error on it and stuff like that. Maybe not. I don't even know if that would be necessary really, but I guess ultimately we could model the state machine in a way such that when you have to perform some operation, you're either gonna get, the next state, or like the success state or whatever, or the failed state, in a result. And the failed state would basically be treated as the error generic parameter of the result.
Right. So then you would suggest, you agree to separate them out, to have a finished
Yeah, definitely.
success and finished fail.
Again, I think for the same reason, it makes sense to be able to treat them separately, from a type system point of view.
Yeah, obviously, just because they share the same, let's call it, property, that they can move further, doesn't have to be one state like they drew it on a diagram.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. So I guess going forward, once we start to do the state pattern refactoring, I guess that's like one of the changes we can do. All right. I think I had a few more notes here. Okay. So next item is the intermediate states. I believe this is kind of what we already agreed on, as like it's fine to do, it's right to do. So for example, again, I was reviewing a bit the state machines we have, the issuance and verification, the issuance and presentation, and one of the things I ran into credential build. So yeah, we have this transition, send credential, but however, it's not just sending credential, it's first creating credential, then sending it. So yeah, I believe this should be split out into like separate transitions, and therefore we should have some kind of intermediate state here for credential build, and then the next state, credential sent, and so forth.
Yep, I agree. I think, like we discussed before, I think that the states in the RFCs are basically just conceptual, like business-driven or flow-driven states, whereas we can basically take advantage of some intermediate states to represent stuff that happens in the middle, like this example with, like when you want to send a credential, you're first gonna create it, and then you're gonna send it. And like these two operations might fail for different reasons. So again, I guess it also makes it easier to manage what's happening and where errors occur, compared to having everything in one place. It goes down to, I guess, a broader discussion, but overall, I think that this is fine to do. The only, I guess, I'm just gonna call it downside, although I don't think it's a downside. But thinking about what we discussed with George some while ago about having the like migrating state machines from one Aries implementation, maybe from a different language, to Aries VCX, and maybe the other way around too. Well, I mean, I see that as a nice thing to be able to do, but I think that also having that involve some legwork isn't necessarily that bad, and especially this kind of things can be resolved statically, like or outside of Aries VCX. Maybe we could have a different crate where people could contribute, even saying, yeah, hey, this is how you, or these are some scripts to migrate the, I don't know, Aries VCX state machine to Occupy or the other way around, and so on, for people that need it. But because that's this might mess up a bit, right? But in the end, I think it's also like having this kind of thing is also maybe not a priority we should focus on either. Like we aim for interoperability in terms of runtime, but data structures are, I guess, up for grabs. Like you can declare them as you want and as it seems fit based on the language you're working in, right? We obviously cannot just translate the state machines from Python to Rust or the other way around, simply because we might want to be converting them between one and the other. So we want to have them as similar as possible. It's a nice thing to have, but I will not sacrifice our own environment to like having things work as smoothly and as well as possible in Aries VCX just to be able to transfer the state machines to some other side. And I think, again, it would still be something that's possible. It's just going to involve a little bit more legwork. And
yeah, I 100% agree. So I don't even have any further comment than that.
right.
And yeah, actually, so basically this implementation, and yeah, the next issue of this implementation, coming back to the notes here, is what I refer to as transition linearization. So the fact that when you call these, for example, there's more cases like this, I think, when you call send credential, first issue we already like discussed just before, the fact that credential is being built here. But the second issue is that you don't really know which state you're gonna end up in, whether it's gonna be the credential send, like aka successful one, or if you're gonna go to the finished state with like error. And I drew this picture before. I'll just pull it up real quick. That was on a George PR type state pattern. Yeah, I drew this picture. So the idea is, and again, this could be done something, I'm not sure if it's worth it, but it could be theoretically done even before the state pattern. A rework might not be difficult to do, actually.
I don't think we should, though, because that's one of the things that the type state pattern brings along implicitly.
Yeah.
The transitions become linear.
Yeah, right. But at least whether it's going to be done through the state pattern, we kind of agree, I guess, that it should kind of look like this, right? That you have like there will be always only one result for each transition, and basically sending the problem report will be the responsibility of the state machine operator or the user.
Yes.
Right. Cool. So that's good because apparently we are like pretty much aligned on all these 3 points, and this could be kind of a guideline for all of us, and also for especially for maybe George now once he's started applying the state pattern on the additional protocol. Okay, so that brings us to the work in progress and the timestamp pattern. So George couldn't join us today, but he left a comment on Discord saying, I've mostly paused work on a holder state pattern and will continue after messages crate is merged. I will also review messages crate if/when it's ready. And that's consequently bring us to the messages crate, and that's update.
That's my
update
domain.
for you.
Yeah, so it's feature complete finally. Basically working now on implementing tests and more documentation, moved some things around, made the macros, use fully qualified paths and stuff like that. Um, I am running into a small issue which I don't really like. It's basically related to SERDES or SERDE JSON's raw value, which is basically just an untouched uh, string slice from the input. And it's basically for avoiding deserialization. And we use that. We could use that in some places, like even in the attachments where you don't know exactly what you're going to expect. So you kind of leave it to the user to deserialize um, based on whatever they expect to receive. Or conversely, I don't know, when you forward a message, like you implement a mediator, the inner JSON is of no importance to you, really. It's just yeah, it's basically there just so you can forward it, serialize it back after you wrap it and or unwrap it and send it out. Now the problem with this is it's a bit related to how we have this new message implementation and the separation between the content and the decorators. Um, and basically it's a bug in SERDE about or SERDE JSON about that raw value which cannot be flattened for some reason. And from what I've seen, I looked a bit closer into the implementation. It's kind of hacked into SERDE JSON, and it's basically hacked into working only with the deserializer that SERDE JSON provides, which is fine. But when, like in most cases, but when you do some flattening or stuff like that, SERDE basically delegates the input to a different serializer, similarly to what we do with the message type um, and so on. So that's where the issue is, because with like the raw value being made to work explicitly with have a special treatment in the like the deserializer implemented for JSON alone, then other deserializers don't really know how to treat it and just fail. Yeah, so I looked into it. I don't think it's going to be a hard thing to fix. The issue has been open for like 2 years. Um, so I might toy around with that just a bit to see if I can figure it out, in an hour or so, or get something working. Probably going to work a bit more on it in the weekend, but anyway. In the meantime, I guess we can just use the standard value, the one that allocates. Although I would like to avoid, like in the future, hopefully if I can manage to pull up a PR and fix this, then we could go back to the raw value. And in fact, having that raw value, having that ability to hold it in a structure that can be flattened uh, would actually mean that I think we can even remove that not unsafe, but the private stuff that we do for message deserialization, for Aries message deserialization, because we could just have the type in a structure and then just flatten the rest of the contents into raw values, and then just deserialize that into the actual message after we treat the type. So there wouldn't be any more weird stuff going around with, we're just abusing the private parts of SERDE anymore. So it would have quite some benefits. So yeah, that would be, it would be pretty cool. Yeah, but apart from that, so in the meantime, I'm basically going to resort to using just the value, like the allocating one. Continue with implementing tests. Pretty much only tests and documentation are remaining now. There are still some renaming to be done. And there is like a short list on the PR. I'm trying to keep track of things that I do or things that are more meaningful to note, or things that I run into and maybe don't want to deal with at that very moment. So it's basically a list of things that need to be done or have been done. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And like as you guys review it, I actually encourage you to add things here if you see something that's worth adding. Some of them, like for instance, that move the error module inside message type and so on and so forth, seemed like a good idea initially, but then it didn't because it's I guess it kind of makes sense, even if that's the only error that really occurs. It makes sense to have it at the top of the crate, because if for some reason we would have additional errors, they would all sit there. And it's also used um, in the message macros, so in our custom messages macros. So it's nice to have it somewhere at the top where it's easily accessible and it wouldn't be moved around throughout the place. Because again, if another error type comes along, then we might just move it back to the top level. So I think it's sitting well there. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Not a big update, but things are moving, and as you guys can, like anybody that wants can start reviewing this. Like in terms of functionality, things are not really gonna change as much. So pretty much everything that was planned to be implemented is implemented. It's just a matter of like minor adjustments and mostly testing and documentation.
Do you have any idea or a rough estimate as to when do you think we can merge it?
Once it's fully reviewed.
Assuming there wouldn't be like a huge kind of a request throughout the review.
Yeah, I mean, once these things are done and once it's reviewed. So for instance, like this is a big thing and it's kind of repetitive in some way, but then not really. Like I noticed, for instance, that I missed aliasing the forward message from the routing protocol. So just the mediator stuff. Like there are these small things that can still be there. So that's why I would like it to be reviewed. I don't know exactly how long. Maybe I suspect about a couple of days, maybe 2 days or 3 days or so. I'm sure that next week we'll be able to merge it.
Do you think it's possible to start integrating it, into some protocol in parallel? Just kind of a, at least a
I wouldn't want to
proof
do
of
that.
concept.
I wouldn't want to do that until testing is done, really. Because like just how I discovered this issue, and I was aware of the limitations for raw value. They just didn't occur to me before because the messages were all like in just one structure and there was no flattening. So things like this can come up, and I only discovered that because I was testing the message deserialization. So
Right.
I would rather at least have the testing part done, which I kind of picked up now when I'm focusing on that right now, compared to like maybe documentation that can be added later, or even a rename. Although I would like to have the renames done too, so that we don't change things around 20 times. But documentation especially can be made sort of a bit at a later stage, I guess. Although it would be nice to have just everything in one go, I guess.
Or
And
maybe, I was just thinking if I could somehow help out to parallelize this, and I was wondering maybe it could be fairly simple to do this kind of a test which would compare the serialized. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not. Yeah, I don't know if it will be time consuming or not. But the idea was like to compare serialized messages, between the two crates, the original messages and this new one, to kind of check, if it's producing the same stuff.
could be.
It will be always deleted, so it wouldn't have any sort of long-term value, but I guess it would give us
for the immediate I guess of the immediate future, it would make sense. And I would suggest to do that like in the old messages crate, so that when we delete it, we would also remove those tests. But it's a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Maybe if I'll have some extra
Yeah,
time,
you can.
try it out.
Sure.
It would be also nice way to
I'm actually gonna
get
add
a
it to
hands on
the list.
crate.
It's a really good idea. I'm gonna add it here.
Okay. All right, we coming to almost the last point of the upcoming work. So I don't think there's like any items, like anything surprising, anything new, but I guess I'll just put here like finish to kind of conclude like what's going on and what's like the main, let's call it short-term goals. So I guess to finish the messages create, finish and then subsequently integrate messages to create into Aries VCX. And then we would go with a type state pattern, and we would do that obviously on the main pieces to be applied on the holder started by George, credential issuer, proof verifier, proof, I'll call it presentation. And presentation prover. And yeah, potentially, well, I guess I wouldn't like really dab into this one. But I would like to actually, before we do the type state pattern, I would like to apply this kind of changes we discussed here, or at least some of them, on the on the verifier and on the issuer, to kind of minimize the amount of changes doing the type state pattern transition. And I don't know if it could save us, speaking from UPSA's perspective, it would be nice for us to have a smooth transition where we don't actually have to, where we can migrate stuff piece by piece without having to kind of totally different data structures and implementations for the old approach and new approach. So I'll try to actually put the code without the type state pattern as it is today, try to apply some of these improvements, and then yeah, hopefully that would kind of minimize the breaking changes doing the type state pattern itself and make it kind of easier to think about. And
I
then
don't know. I personally still think that it's some effort that will go to waste, but maybe I'm not familiar with I didn't look at all the state machines, so I'm not particularly familiar with what's happening under the hood. But I am quite sure that migrating to the type state pattern will involve some amount of reworking the methods and all that. So
it's fine with the methods. I'm more concerned about I'm mainly concerned about the the state, the serialization format itself. So if it would be after, basically you can do the type state pattern as far as you don't significantly change.
yeah, but we can basically have that conversion in place, couldn't we? For like exactly how you did right now, to basically be able to deserialize the old format, convert it to the new one, and just work with that from this point on.
Yeah, that's something we definitely won't avoid, as I wasn't even able to avoid it right now. So
Yeah, no,
that'll
that's
be good.
probably,
Yeah,
yeah, that's probably a necessary evil.
that's right. Okay, and I think after this is gonna keep us busy, I think, for quite a while, maybe I would say a month at least. But I guess after that, although it's just to put more focus on is the VDR tools. Basically replacing the VDR tools with the smaller libraries, and that work has been done for the credential holder, I suppose, and approver, or no, maybe verifier. I don't remember off my head, but in some, when using Aries VCX, like from certain roles on using only certain state machines from certain roles, then we can basically avoid using VDR tools today, as Georgian submitted that PR with a feature flag. But we should kind of push this further to just be able to get rid of VDR tools across the board and use all of the protocols without VDR tools, and then hopefully eventually delete it completely. That will liberate us from like lots of from VDR tools, which do have accurate technical depth, and it also has potential to, I guess, simplify the code base a bit. Well, it's hidden behind the trades, and I think those trades will stay. So maybe won't have significant impact on the code base itself, as it's kind of shielded off even today. But it's still important step in the evolution to get rid of this. Do you have, George, do you have any
There's no
other
George
thoughts
here.
on like a road, maybe on the roadmap here? I know the timestamp pattern, the messages create, and then my
There is the doc
here,
resolver and the DID parser as
right.
well.
Okay, I'll put this kind of like in same level with its resolver, and that could be actually like pretty much parallelized then, I guess, by multiple people.
Yeah.
Did resolver. Oh, what's going on here? Yeah. Yeah, did
And
parser.
DID parser. Yeah.
And that's kind of basically bringing us pretty much, well, that already covers many of these points here in the backlog. I think after, and I guess like after we have all of this, then I would suggest then we can actually start doing these like 2.0 protocols, and maybe then start looking into DITCOM 2.0 or so. And it'll be beautiful if in the meantime we have a mentee which could help us doing the UniFFI and Mediator client. That would be really nice. But we'll see how the program goes. Well, we covered everything. It's 6 minutes before 11. Do you have anything else to cover?
Nope, that's it for me.
All right. Well, in that case, stop sharing my screen. Thanks for joining in, and thanks everyone for listening. And we'll be here again next week. Cheers.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.